The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Alise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. This show has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015, and I enjoy hosting it each week. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. If we've not met yet before and you don't know me, I'm an organizational psychologist and therapist, logotherapist to be particular, speaker and author, and my team and I at Gusto Now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by articulating their purpose and building inspirational leaders and cultures activated by meaning and purpose to turn those companies from a flatline EKG to a vibrant destination workplace. There, people are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow into their fuller potential, and are committed to stay and perform dynamically on the company's mission. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or alisecortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, we have with us Deb Smolensky. She's a highly sought-after speaker and award-winning thought leader in the area of human performance and health at work. She serves as the Wellbeing and Engagement Practice Leader at NFP and as an advisor for the InsurTech, FinTech, and digital health startup communities. She's the author of Brain On, Mental Fitness Strategies for Sharpening Focus, Boosting Energy, and Winning the Workday, which we'll be talking about today. She joins today from Chicago. Deb, a warm welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
It is exciting, and I want to celebrate what you brought to the world, this beautiful book. Look at this thing that you did.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much to me.
You're very, very, very welcome. You know, I don't know if you're a mom, but my listeners and viewers who have been following the show for a while have heard me say this many, many, many times. Bringing this book into the world is actually much harder than bringing a human being into the world.
Yes, I should have talked to you before going on this adventure. That was a learning.
I understand. But yet we keep doing it. So it's wonderful. And we're here, we're the winners for it. And so I want to get into, and as I mentioned to this show being curated, we want to build on all the other beautiful things we've learned on the show. And there were so many things that I took from your book, Deb, that were delightfully refreshing and different. And I want to start with just situating why I think your work is so important and taking a little bit from Jeremy Hunter's foreword that wrote in your book. He situates in that foreword so beautifully. You know, we've become these knowledge workers, innovation workers, and we're working in cubicles, and this whole notion of needing the fundamental shift from physical work to mental, emotional, and social, and that entails working in these cubicles, and that we're encouraged to multitask like the computers on our desk, and leading to depleted mental reserves. We created an always-on technology that never lets people rest and recharge. And then he says, no wonder people are burnt out, refusing to go back to the office and quitting their jobs in droves. Who wants to live like this? So if we situate, that's kind of where we are right now, as kind of a context of why your work is so important and what you're teaching us at it. Let's start there.
Yeah, first of all, as you alluded to, it's never just one person contributing to a book. And I was so grateful to Dr. Hunter for adding those insightful comments. I listened to his work as a professor at the Peter Drucker Institute over and over again. And it resonated so much with me in terms of we are knowledge workers. We use our brains all day long to create work. So 8 hours a day, my brain is on, your brain is on 480 minutes every day. We have never learned how our brains work at work, and we've never been trained how to really show up and use our computer system in the workplace. And that is at the fundamental crux of why I wrote this book, right? That is what we are dealing with when we're overwhelmed, when we're burned out. I just keep seeing the signals go on, and it all gets back to understanding our computer system in context of how work in the work environment is created and is, part of our daily, what I call obstacle course.
And as I mentioned, Deb, I just think that what you taught me, because as you know, I read the book cover to cover, that there's so much freshness in that. I learned about how my brain did work, and I want to, of course, share that with our listeners. And I appreciate that you really situate that. You say the core of well-being is nurturing a strong, healthy, resilient mindset, and this is really, what you've been working on for much of your career. And so you're talking about what you're really putting forth is prioritizing well-being above anything else. And you go on to say that this is a radically new way of thinking about your workday, taking the steps to ensure your mental well-being is intact before tackling any of your goals for the day and interacting with your colleagues and team. I find that to be not only just honoring yourself, but responsible for your own life and dreams.
I love that. And, thank you for reading my book cover to cover. That is just such a generous gift. And I really appreciate that. And the insights you pull, like this question, is amazing, right? You got to the crux of what I'm trying to communicate. And so, yeah, with that, we're constantly trying to figure out how to work better, how to work smarter. But it's inside, it's internal. Like we are in charge, we are the CEO, we are the computer. It's just we don't know how we believe what we're thinking, but we don't understand that it's not accurate. I always say our brains actually are programmed to be our bodyguard. They're not programmed to help us learn, help us grow, help us connect, help us communicate, help us to work. Like the list goes on and on. Those are skill sets.
Mm. I got so much from that, the science and the insights that you put in your book there, and even so much that you really helped us understand just even the name of your book, Brain On. But then you go on to distinguish how easily our brain gets tripped up and turned off, as you say, by the daily distractions and obstacles that pop up. And I love that you go on. You say it doesn't matter how smart you may be, your brain isn't built to process the thousands of pieces of information coming at it each day. And when it feels overwhelmed, it stops its healthy thinking mode and defaults to its primal emotional mode. And that's when we get ourselves into trouble and we make our poor behavior choices and unwise decisions. They can have lasting and destructive consequences on ourselves, our team members, and others in the organization, which is what you put forth. I think that's really important for our listeners and viewers to understand just the consequences of not really monitoring this and intervening and as we'll talk about, coaching your brain.
Yeah, what you're hitting upon is like a crucial point, and it's this concept of being aware. Being aware is a muscle, a brain rep, and that doesn't write a book. Like I could have been done in one sentence, as it turned out. Is like you just have to be aware of what you're thinking and processing at every moment. But I expanded, and I'm glad you found it helpful. I think what was very intriguing and very transformative in my own growth through this is knowing that it's normal. Our brains are programmed, and the default system is to be in fear mode. It's that primal brain trying to keep us safe. And so giving us grace, knowing that every time our phone, like we drop our phone or an email dings or like a doorbell rings, the initial response is just, who's there? What's going on? Like the fear brain is normal, and we have to realize that and then turn our thinking brain or our prefrontal cortex brain or smart brain on to override that primal response. And we've just never been taught that.
One of the things I say when I'm working with organizations and leaders is, is as amazing as we really have evolved to be as a species. I mean, we can send people to the moon and back. We can create beautiful skyscrapers. We can create amazing, innovative companies. We can run crazy, huge countries. And yet at the end of the day, we still have that reptilian brain that's still running us. And so learning to engage in that thinking brain is so interesting. And I like some of the practices that you gave us in the book. You gave us lots of ways to try to elevate this awareness. Just even asking yourself, wait a minute, hang on right now. How am I feeling? Who does this very often?
Right. Nobody does. That's the whole point. Like, that's the only second reason I decided to go on this 2-year journey to write. We just don't know that these are so important, yet so simple. So thank you for pointing that out so clearly. Uh, if we would ask ourselves and check in with ourselves, me, myself, and I, we would not be stressed out right now. We would not be burned out. I believe we wouldn't have the conflicts we have because we are aware of how we are showing up. It's just we don't know. So we now have to train our brains by asking ourselves, hey, what am I feeling right now? Or this is really exciting. I feel excited talking to you here. Every moment before an email or before a meeting now, I try to ask myself, hey, what's going on? What am I feeling? Or where's the tension? Because emotions are just as powerful as the thoughts we're thinking.
Mm.
And making sure I come with my best self if I am not there.
Mm. So there's so many beautiful layers there. And then that kind of builds on to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which just really frankly blew me away, Deb. But you do talk about, some days are more energy depleting than others. And of course, our job is just to stay aware and to monitor how fast our brain power is draining. Be cognizant of this, turn yourself on, if you will, and carefully and continuously to redirect energy toward those goals and tasks that lead us to more productivity, growth, and joy. And what I found really interesting was you say dealing with these challenges and distractions can take up to more than 50% of our day. That is mind-boggling.
Yeah, the science really shows mind-boggling statistics. It shows that our mind is wandering almost 50% of the day. It shows our attention span is less than 8 seconds, I think, at this point in time, according to a Microsoft study. The way our brain works in this complex VUCA world is not coinciding, and it is not for our best interest. So I think what I realized after doing what I'll call the cognitive or the brain on mental fitness exercises and showing up with clarity or focus or connection or whatever my intention was, is I was still exhausted some days at 2 p.m. at work. Or right now, I want to take a nap. Or some days even by 8 if my commute was really brutal. And so that energy, Dan Pink says it in his book, When, right? Knowing when you're the most productive, and energy management is the second part of the formula to brain on to get to an energizer state. You have to have your thinking brain on, but you also have to manage that energy throughout the day and do those brain boosters to what I call end up better at the end of the day than you started, which I'm not sure any of us even know how to do at this point.
It's funny you say that, Deb. Now that you've said it the way that you do, I can remember a few days that really stand out as just smashing. And they were because I had this crescendo of energy that it just seemed to grow during the day. And they stand out because they're unusual, right?
Yeah.
They don't happen every day. They don't happen, regularly for that matter.
Right. And so part of it is we can make that happen. We can look at our obstacle course, which I call the calendar, right? If you don't have any white space in there and you're making your brain run through emails and meetings and conversations without any recovery, that energy management, we fall on the couch as a whole world society, right? By the end of the workday. But the point is back to your brilliant synthesis is it's all about awareness. Building in that space or managing our energy is the key to those standout days, and we can create more of them by following that.
I love that. So one of the many things I appreciate about your book is I like how you organize ideas. And so you have this brain on energy matrix that you started to allude to with the energizer piece here. But if you could just kind of speak to that, there's two, it's a 4-part quadrant, if you will. And so you've got the disengaged, there's 2 kinds of disengaged, and then you've got the engaged, 2 kinds of engaged. Can you just speak to that a little bit, please? I think that's fascinating, very helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I love how it is a matrix. You described it perfectly. So when I think about the work day, there's just two things to really live your best life at work. It's managing if you're in your thinking brain and seeing things clearly. So the brain on, brain off, up against am I engaged? Am I doing what I love to do? Or in your context, am I aligned with my purpose, right? And those things, or am I disengaged? And when you put those across a matrix, you get four key areas that don't tell you just one and done, like for the rest of your career. It's a daily exercise. So if I'm brain off, meaning I'm in my negative thinking and I am low energy or not engaged, I'm what I call survivor mode. I'm just watching the clock until it clicks 5 o'clock, right? But then if I'm still brain off and I'm not really thinking about my thoughts, but I'm really engaged in what I do, or I'm really loving the day, then you can get into kind of warrior mode, like go, 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 go. And you can be in that mode until you burn out. So it's only when you cross that threshold of turning your brain on, paying attention to things, that you have a chance to get into that energizer mode or winning your work day. And the difference is on the left-hand side, if you're still brain on and you're aware of what's going on and you're managing your emotions and regulating them, but something's missing, that spark, as you well know, like with those beautiful books and insightful books behind you, you're in the seeker mode. There's something missing.
Yeah.
And until you align with your strengths, your purpose, until your goals include your well-being, you won't move over to that sweet spot, which combines being brain on and energized about your day, which is why I call it the energizer.
Oh, that was beautifully explained and so succinct. Let's let our listeners and viewers think about that as we take our first break here, those 4 different buckets: seeker, survivor, energizer, and warrior. I'm Alise Cortez, your host. We've been on the air with Deb Smolensky. She's the Wellbeing and Engagement Practice Leader at NFP, and as an advisor for the SurTech, FinTech, and digital health startup communities, serves to help lift the world. We've been talking a bit about why it's important to be aware of our brain and whether or not we're a brain on or not. After the break, we're going to learn about creating the emotions we actually want to experience at work. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, as I too am dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work and they're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. I continue to research and write my own books. So one of my latest that came out in March of 2023 is called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand the nature of today's workforce, what they want and need to be vitally inspired and engaged and give their best. And then I provide 22 best projects that help you create an organization to meet those needs. You can learn more about it at gusto-now.com or grab your copy on Amazon. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Deb Smolensky. She's the author of Brain On: Mental Fitness Strategies for Sharpening Focus, Boosting Energy, and Winning the Workday. Sounds good to me. So this next bit here, I think people will be really surprised. And I love how you dangle this here for us. And I mentioned it just before the break, but you talk about how we can actually use our brain to manage and create the emotions we want to experience at work. I love that.
Yes, thank you. I'm still back into the intro. I love your intro. I feel like I'm a walk-up baseball player and it totally turns my brain on. So thank you for that.
I'm
So I
glad.
totally, in honesty, lost the question for just a second, but we
Okay.
can't control our emotions and create the emotions we want. And that's a really good point. Even for this, I knew I wanted to be excited, but I was low energy. So I wanted to come show up with my best self. And the thing to know is, again, our brain on default is fear-based. And so we always have to overcome that. And if we don't, what happens is we're either going towards the threat or the reward system. So we always want to go and be aware of how to create emotions moving us forward, how to be aware of the thoughts that will help us move forward, because there's no neutral in our thoughts. They either degrade our lives or they upgrade our lives. And so to create those emotions, you actually have to figure out how to trick your brain sometimes. For example, when a child falls down, this probably better than I do, but when a child falls down and you don't go like, "Ugh," you go like, oh, it's okay, right? The mirror neurons, they go up and the baby starts blowing it off or maybe hopefully even laughing. Well, that's the kind of tricks we want to use to help our brain stay in brain on mode or in a positive emotional state.
What I love about that, among many other things, Deb, is the agency in it, activating the human agency in ourselves. I just think that is wonderful. And that speaks to one of the next things that I really admire about what you've given us here. You talk about how high performing people don't leave their mindset up to chance. They actively work to overcome any misguided thoughts and poor emotional regulation and irrational or primal fears. And you say that's why training your brain is as important as aerobic conditioning to lead a healthy life. And starting your day with a successful mindset begins by avoiding your phone, your calendar, or anything that throws you into a work mode very first thing that you awake. You need to be able to get yourself online and in a positive, energizing way. We've had people on this program talking about ways that we can start every day by really getting clear about what's my bold vision for what I want for my life, starting with that versus social media or the news. And I think that is so powerful what you put forth, that no one that is high performing leaves their mindset to chance.
Yeah, that really stuck with me as I was writing the book over and over again. If we don't take agency, I love that word you use, right? If we don't take accountability and agency and understand that our brains just aren't wired for this and it's a skill and a practice. If we want to be our best selves, it's a skill and a practice all day long to create that high performing brain to be in energizer mode. So I really studied professional athletes in this. I watched in the Wimbledon in June, one of the champions, Djokovic, in the finals match, throw his racket after missing an easy point. But that's normal, right? Brain off, we go into fear mode immediately, or anger mode. But what was interesting is he immediately did his breathing. He walked back, pumping himself up, and he visualized his next stroke as an ace. And what did he do is he aced it. Like in 20 seconds,
Amazing.
professional athletes go from the worst brain off to bringing their brains on. So I think of us as corporate athletes. I think we all need to think of it in that way in some regard.
I like that idea a lot. And then I'm going to bring us to this next point. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to be maybe blown away or blown back by this? But I was amazed that you shared with us that science has proven that we only have 3 to 4 hours of productive brain power and resources each day, and that's it.
That's it. I know. I'm grateful to know that. And I'm so grateful to those that study this all day long, because again, we don't know how our brain works, but that is it. not only is that, it is some of us work at different times better. So you might be an afternoon person, as Daniel Pink says, or a morning person. But that has really changed how I try to focus every day, even my calendar, and how I shift priorities of what I'm going to work on. Like I said, this is a little out of my comfort zone speaking to you at this point of my day. Like I should be asleep right now, but I knew like I needed to save my good brain productivity for this, right? And so I didn't stress myself out or use that much energy up until this point. It was a different type of day for me.
You know, I always, one of the great things about hosting the show, Deb, is I do learn so much from my guests. You really help me become a better version of myself. And I really appreciate that. And I want you to know that what you taught me, this idea that we only have 3 to 4 hours of productive brain power, has radically altered the way that I want to utilize, especially my weekends, because I tend to use my weekends for writing and longer research projects. But I can let myself get totally distracted. And before I know it, I've lost those 3 to 4 beautiful, precious hours, and then I'm mad about it when Monday comes. And I want you to know that you have changed me in this way for the better. Thank you for that gift.
Oh, thank you. That's such a generous, beautiful comment. I will treasure that. And I'm so glad. You know, you've wrote such beautiful books and empowering books. And as you know, you just want to help people, right?
Yeah.
And so that makes me so happy, first of all. And I'm just absorbing that with gratitude because that keeps my brain on and keeps me
Mm-hmm.
engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also I too just want to admit that I continuously have to check in with myself too because we get distracted, and it's a key mental practice just to use those 3 hours strategically. So I think you're highlighting for all of us a practice that we can take back immediately and always check in. Am I using my time right? Is this my productive hour? Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. And then, again, that builds us just to this next point that I wanted to make. I was just also another one of the beautiful, very fresh points that you make in your book is, you talk about if you were to ask anybody, you or me were to ask anybody about their important relationships in their life, they would name such things as their partner, their children, their parents, their siblings, their friends, their boss, their coworkers, but no one would actually say their relationship with their brain was a top priority. But in the end, you say it's the most important relationship that we have. I found that so compelling.
Yeah, if you think about it, they always say you're your best cheerleader. It's just you in the end, right? You have to be self-sufficient and independent, but it's really you and your brain. Like if your brain is being kind to you, which takes practice to not wander in negative neighborhoods and those things. The relationship with your brain, understanding your thoughts and your emotions, I call that the fountain of youth.
Oh my gosh, that's delightful. Well, as we said before we got on there, Deb, that particular idea that we just have been talking about is really cultivating the relationship with your brain in an intentional, loving, nurturing way. That idea really resonates with me. And again, doing so then allows us to be able to do what we want with our one precious life in a much more effective, impactful way. And I'm behind that 128,000%.
I love that. Yes. Giving ourselves grace and knowing, this is the key, knowing that our default system is going to be fight, flight, freeze. It just is. That is how we are wired for that one day, may it never be so, that a car comes running down, right? Or some bear jumps out of the woods. Our brain is ready. That's what it's designed to do. And it's always going to react. So, where's my keys? Oh, I'm so mad I missed the meeting. Why is this like everything first starts with the negative and we have to bring it to the positive, but not beating up how we think, just knowing that we have to strengthen our thoughts. And we can do that, science shows, with neuroplasticity, which is mental fitness. And that is the only way. Upgrade our thoughts, rewire our brain. It's so important every minute of the day.
Mm. Well, and I also appreciated that in order to do that neuroplasticity, you offered, prioritizing self-care with brain boosters. And I really get behind this because I also put this in some of my programs. But you talk about, the importance of actively planning your day to include enough rest. And I know people say, well, I'm so busy, and yet you still have the choice of when you go to bed and when you get up. But you also introduce the importance of nature and music and play and connection. And these are all ways to restore our brain's energy when we're feeling a drop or in the brain drain. And so that's why some of the programs that I do, I incorporate those sort of things: joy, gratitude, wonder, awe, because they're self what do I want to say? Well, energizing. So I appreciated very much that you talked about that we have within our means these immediate brain boosters. So if you could say just a little bit more about, how do they work, and what other options might we have?
Yeah, and I did notice, and I love how you do incorporate them seamlessly, right, within the work in the organization. And so I appreciate that call out, because we can focus on our thoughts. We can focus on our thoughts and trying to change them and being aware of how we feel. But at some point, we just are in a funk, or we're tired, and we just need just a spark of something, or rest and recovery. So this work actually comes from Dr. Rock and Dr. Daniel Siegel. It's called the Mind Platter.
Mm.
And when I heard this, I'm like, why don't we know about this more? But it's ways to feed and energize our brain. So in my book, I basically have an illustration of the brain, like with a charger, right? A plugging in. This is how we charge our brains, just as if we charge our phone's battery. And so it really is, according to science, all the things that actually elicit those dopamine hits or oxytocin and release those neurotransmitters and chemicals that actually connect us back to people or energize us or fill us up. And so I love the ones you named. I always say my name backwards, Deb, is bed. So I hit the 20-minute nap all the time. I think I was born for that. And when I was writing this book, or if I have a hard meeting, like I mentioned earlier, I have a walk-up song. For 3 minutes, I listen to something so engaging in terms of music. Even like your introduction to this show is amazing. But I also find, like, even hydrating. So I have a hydration drink here, and just filling up if you're hungry, you're kind of depleting, your brain uses glucose. Those kinds of things are really helpful just to keep that brain power going.
Mm. Oh, such good self-care mechanisms. All right, let's grab our last break here, Deb. I am Dr. Alise Cortez. We've been on the air with Deb Smolensky. She's the Wellbeing and Engagement Practice Leader at NFP, and she also serves as an advisor for the InsurTech, FinTech, and digital health startup communities. We've been talking more about specific ways that we can monitor and help energize our brain. For the last segment after the break, we're going to get into how we can use her work to build what she calls regenerative cultures. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. I mentioned in the last break about my latest book coming out, The Great Revitalization. Along with that, what I did for you is I created an organizational best practices assessment, and it's waiting for you on gusto-now.com or alisecortez.com. What it does is it lets you really measure the extent to which your current projects are actually meeting today's needs and standards. If you are just joining us today, my guest is Deb Smolensky. She's the author of Brain On, Mental Fitness Strategies for Sharpening Focus, Boosting Energy, and Winning the Workday. So for this last bit here, Deb, I really wanted to take us back into the workplace. Of course, we can use these things anywhere we go in life, but both you and I do a lot of work in the workplaces. And it's exciting to think about how we can use what you have created for us to actually create beautiful, energized, connected teams. And so once again, I go back to one of your beautiful matrices, your quadrant of 4 boxes here. And this is what you call, it's about becoming a brain on regenerative culture. So if you could again distinguish, as you did before, the four pieces, the X and Y axis, and what's in them.
Yeah, I think it was very important for me to first train our brains as individual employees, right? This is all about work and how we show up. But then it's also extremely important, like you mentioned, to talk from an organizational perspective to those that have any influence over others' brains or creating and transforming the collective brain. So this part gets into the organizational section, and it can be applied in the same manner, meaning as an organization, if you are creating a brain off, brain on, engaged, disengaged society or collective community, if you're brain off and you are not engaged as a group, it's very, very depletive. It's very, it takes everything out. You're sucking the life out of every employee, right? If your policies don't nurture people, if your culture is do this, do that, no autonomy, mastery, purpose. So it takes around that scale. If you still stay kind of brain off in the way you treat your employees, meaning you look at them as just more assets and not as a relationship, it can become very transactional as well. But when you start engaging in the collective community, and a lot about what you write, where your practices take into account maybe feedback from employees or your team, where you are asking people what they think, you're making sure psychological safety is there, you hit that mark of sustainable, right? Which I think is where we see the bar. But what I wanted to encourage people and workplaces specifically is to really start aligning with their strengths and purposes, like you allude to and promote, because what that does, when you recognize somebody and value them and align the work with that, it leaps them over into that right top quadrant, which is regenerative. You're no longer deleting and defeating and depleting. You're no longer just sustaining. You're growing and regenerating, and fueling both yourself and the individual as well as the organization by doing so.
And, we've had many people on this program, Deb, over the years talking about, the role and responsibilities leaders have, because literally leaders really think about this, ladies and gentlemen listening or watching. Your leader literally impacts a lot of your life, not just whatever happens during the workday, but how you show up when you come home with your family and how you interact with your significant other, your children, whether or not you choose to engage with positively or negatively with your community. It follows you. And so your impact as a leader is profound. And I hope in some ways that's a little scary. In other ways, I hope it's really, really inspiring, that the difference you can make in someone's life. So what I got really excited about with your work there, Deb, and I could envision this, I don't know if it's on your website, I didn't look that deeply there, but what I love about what you did with that simple little matrix, I think a lot of organizations think we're doing fine, we're good. Okay, maybe you are fine and good, but yet there is this whole other opportunity, this whole regenerative space that you maybe don't understand that you could actually move into. And that's where I get really excited, Deb.
Yeah, I just admire your work and those that really focus on leadership. So let me just double down on what you said. Like, there is such a need and opportunity right now to show up as human-centered, compassionate leaders. Those are all skills.
Yeah.
Thing that we need is a skill, and I call it a mental fitness skill. So I do specifically talk about this leadership mental fitness circuit above and beyond the individual, what else you need to do. And so that is really, in the end, part of a key part of the formula. And I know you've said this before and probably lots of times, but people quit bosses, not jobs.
Yep.
And I spent the last week, based on this New York Times article and this research by Dr. Wellington, I believe his name is, I should have looked, but coming out that says workplace wellness doesn't work. And really what his research says in terms of resilience and mindset and all of this work is it's an and. If we don't help leaders and the culture wrap around and support people, this regenerative culture will never come to fruition, and we will continue to turn people's brains off at every corner or every communication.
And again, I find that really encouraging, because to me, what you put forth is an opening. It's an invitation. It's a space to walk into. And then to be able to build on the knowledge and skills of others who've come before us and who are in our vicinity and surrounded and supportive. I get so excited. And again, for me, Deb, I'm out to build destination workplaces where people really can realize their potential. I believe in the power and the magic of work as one of the best catalyzing forces we have to realize our potential. And yet for so many people, it occurs as a bad four-letter word that they just want to either avoid or try to diminish, their interaction with it as much as possible. So your work is so powerful, so important.
Yeah, I love that. I'm like, wow, I wish everybody would say that. Like, between playing your music at the beginning and saying those words you just said about destination work, like, I'm like all for it. And so it is. I always try to view this as a positive opportunity. So as a leader, if you are struggling, that is, first check in with your brain, your thoughts, because your thoughts create your reality. And how can you latch on to being mentally stronger and using the resources and tools in terms of accountability and awareness to build the workday you want, to build the team you want, to build the leader in you that you want. It's all within us. We just need to be aware of our thoughts, challenge our thoughts, and then do our mental fitness to get our thoughts going in the right direction.
That's all.
That's all. I
That's
know our
it.
brain's so. Yes, I know.
No, I'm right there with you. Okay, so where I want to go next, I'm glad I can make you laugh at that, because I meant it to be silly.
Yes.
But I love on this show, what I like so much is I want it to be always educational, one part education, one part inspirational. And I always want listeners and viewers to be able to walk away with something they can immediately put into practice. And so what I want to go to next here is you offer toward the end of your book this brain on audit that you can help that people can use to help assess how their organization and culture are activating the principles in the book. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about each of the 4 buckets in that assessment, if we could.
Yeah. So the 4 buckets, like when you are auditing for a regenerative culture, there's care, there's emotional intelligence, there's communication and growth. Those are the foundations of a regenerative culture. So for care, we have moved into the mission of HR or talent or whoever you are in that organization to not only attract and retain, we are now attract, retain, and care for. The
Yes, I
employee
love that.
contract
Yes.
employer contract has changed. And when you bring on someone and when they join you, you are now united in caring for the organization and that individual. And so that is an audit. And I give several different topics within there that you have to start to focus. It's new, but that is essential to build a regenerative culture. Teaching everyone emotional intelligence, emotional literacy, whatever you want to call it, is the core communication flowing through the culture. So I think there's several different studies, but summarizing them, we as a society can name 6 different emotions usually. Like, how are you feeling? Good. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm happy, sad, angry, just 6. But there's 2,400 different emotions that when you get very clear on them can help navigate and elevate your life. And so teaching emotional literacy, being understanding of how your words impact the others, if they have emotional literacy or if they are learning emotional, like all of that comes into play. So I am a big fan of integrating that, which then dovetails into communication. We often at an HR or organizational level are pushing out communications. And I had the chance to ask Daniel Goldman personally, well, how do you build emotional intelligence into communications, especially email? And what he said was, to me, profound. And he said his wife said, he didn't even know. His wife said, if that email strengthens the relationship, that is what you're going for, versus degrading it. So before you hit send in your communications, is it going to make people worried? Is it unclear or uncertain that's going to cause chaos among the brains and turn them off? Does this communication strengthen your relationship with employees or degrade it? Those are the filters or audits you look at from a communication perspective. And then growth mindset. It's either fixed or it's growth, but they can be both, right? But what we want to nurture is those words that I'll open up the growth of the organization, the willingness to try something new, because change is going to be constant and uncertainty triggers us brain off all the time. And can you be strong enough to say, I think I can try this, or curious enough to say, oh, can you tell me more? Growing versus constricting or contracting is the only way to move forward and create that regenerative culture.
I am completely in line with that, as you can well imagine. So Deb, we've managed already to come through the show. It's crazy how fast it goes. You know that this show is listened to by people around the world who care about improving their own experience of work, being part of organizations and cultures that help them realize their greatness. They would love to be led by inspirational leaders that really bring them to that task or become those inspirational leaders. And we do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with today?
Every moment of every day, you are constructing your reality, building it from the ground up. And your thoughts create your perceptions create your choices you see and view, and your choices then create your results. If you practice just awareness and those mental fitness exercises aligned with that, you can really find the fountain of youth, I believe. At least you can win your work day. And that is my hope for everybody out there, is to combat burnout and start winning our work day together.
Oh, Deb, what a beautiful finish. I'm so happy to know you, to have learned from you, to have shared you with my listeners around the world. Thank you for being a guest on Working on Purpose.
Thank you. It was a pure pleasure. I will treasure this. Thank you so much.
I'm very happy to hear that. Makes my heart sing. Thank you. Now, listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn to follow this woman here, find a way to do this. So if you want to learn more about her work, or her book, the best way to do this is probably just start with her personal website. It's debsmolensky.com. Let me spell that for you. So Deb, D-E-B, and then Smolensky is S-M-O-L-E-N-S-K-Y, debsmolensky.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Marga Hoek talking about her incredibly well-researched and inspiring book, Tech for Good. We talked about some of the examples from the 85 companies she showcases in the book that are employing advanced technologies to tackle really complex problems in the world. This episode will inspire you to look for new ways you can utilize today's technology to advance your mission or causes. Next week, we'll be on the air with Tamara Ryan, the CEO of the Women's Bean Project, talking about the incredibly intimate look she gives of the women who work at the Women's Beans Project and are struggling mightily to move out of poverty and move from incarceration back into a life of productivity and happiness. Our conversation will open your eyes that the world is not at all black or white, why poverty is such a curse, and inspire you to help more people. See you there. And remember, work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.